The golden light of crystal chandeliers bathed the Williams and Cross LLP launch party in success. Lucas stood aside, watching with quiet pride as Sarah, resplendent in midnight blue, worked the room of legal luminaries. His $20 million investment, meticulously documented despite their marriage, had transformed her dream into reality. When she clinked her glass for attention, he smiled, anticipating her acknowledgement of their partnership. "I have an announcement," Sarah's voice carried across the hushed room. She nodded to a waiting server who approached Lucas with a silver tray. Not champagne, but legal papers, divorce papers. "Consider yourself served," she said, her smile never wavering as cameras flashed. 200 witnesses. Public execution of their marriage. Surprisingly, Lucas remained unfazed. Something in his steady gaze suggested that Sarah had overlooked something critical in her calculated betrayal. Lucas Chen stood at the window of his downtown office, the morning light catching on the framed magazine covers that tracked his 15-year journey from coding in a garage to tech industry leadership. His reflection in the glass, silver-streaked dark hair, tailored charcoal suit, contrasted sharply with the memory of the college dropout who once lived on ramen while building his first startup. He adjusted his cufflinks, brushed titanium, a gift from his team after their last successful acquisition. The gesture triggered an involuntary glance at his calendar. Williams and Cross LLP launch, 7:00 p.m. "Your car will be ready at 6, said Melanie from the doorway, his executive assistant's efficiency as dependable as the enterprise software that had built his fortune. "Thank you." His response was automatic, his mind already calculating the evening ahead. 15 years of disciplined innovation had taught him to assess variables and mitigate risks. He approached each venture with the same methodical precision, including his investment in Sarah's law firm, $20 million. A substantial allocation, yet he'd insisted on the same documentation he'd require for any business transaction. "The catering called to confirm your dietary preferences," Melanie added. Lucas nodded, remembering how many corporate celebrations he'd attended alone before meeting Sarah at that legal tech conference. Success had brought him everything except someone to share it with. Until her. "Will there be anything else before your strategy meeting?" Melanie asked. "No," he replied, turning from the window. "Let's focus on today's acquisitions before tonight's celebration." $20 million is significantly more than initially discussed, Gerald Matthews said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The attorney's corner office overlooked the financial district, the afternoon sun highlighting the contract pages spread across his mahogany desk. Sarah leaned forward, her ambitious energy filling the room. The scope expanded when Judith Cross agreed to join. Her client list alone justifies the additional capital. Lucas watched the interplay, noting Gerald's measured caution against Sarah's enthusiasm. He'd witnessed this dynamic countless times in business negotiations, excitement versus prudence. "I believe in Sarah's vision," Lucas said, "but I'd like the same protections I'd require for any investment." Gerald nodded. "Wise. Marriage and business are distinct relationships with different requirements." Sarah's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Surely, that level of documentation isn't necessary between spouses." "It's standard procedure," Gerald replied. "Protection for both parties." "I'm not questioning Lucas's generosity," Sarah said, touching her husband's arm. "It just seems unnecessarily formal." Lucas covered her hand with his. "Think of it as building the firm on proper foundations. The same professional standards you'll provide your clients." Gerald slid another document forward. "This structure classifies the full $20 million as a business investment rather than a marital asset. Each disbursement will be tied to specific development benchmarks. The location lease, staffing, technology infrastructure, Lucas enumerated, each with documentation. Sarah's expression shifted to practiced agreement. Of course. I appreciate your thoroughness. It's why you're successful. She signed where indicated, her pen strokes confident and swift. As Gerald notarized the final page, Lucas felt both satisfaction and a curious sense of having crossed an invisible boundary, one where business principles applied to personal relationships. Necessary, perhaps, but not without cost. Congratulations, Gerald said. Williams & Cross LLP has its founding capital. The transformation of the firm's downtown offices exceeded even Lucas's expectations. Crystal chandeliers, suspended from coffered ceilings, cast golden light across marble floors. Catering staff arranged delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays, while technicians tested the sound system for tomorrow's speeches. Mrs. Williams wants the partnership wall visible immediately upon entry, directed the event coordinator, gesturing toward a backlit display where Sarah's name appeared prominently beside Judith Cross. Lucas noticed his own name was absent, despite the 20 million reasons it might have been included. He filed this observation away without comment. Lucas, there you are. Sarah approached in a tailored suit that conveyed both authority and elegance. The digital displays aren't cycling through the presentation properly. I'll take a look, he replied, following her through the maze of activity. The tech issue was minor, resolved in minutes, but he noticed how staff deferred to Sarah with a formality that hadn't been present months earlier. Her transformation from ambitious attorney to founding partner was nearly complete. The governor confirmed, Judith Cross announced, approaching them with tablet in hand. Tall and imposingly elegant, she embodied old money connections that complemented Sarah's dynamic drive. Excellent, Sarah replied. And the State Bar Association president? Front table, as requested. Sarah turned to Lucas. We should discuss tomorrow's sequence. I've made some adjustments to the speaking order. I thought we'd finalized. The firm's presentation needs to establish its independent identity, Judith interjected smoothly. Market positioning is crucial from day one. Of course, Lucas conceded, recognizing the subtle exclusion. He'd seen similar maneuvers in corporate acquisitions, the gradual distancing once resources were secured. As they walked through the final preparations, Sarah's attention constantly diverted to arriving deliveries and staff questions. Her hand occasionally touched his arm, connection without presence. Tomorrow would mark the culmination of her dream and his investment, a partnership of sorts, though increasingly not the kind he had envisioned. Everything is coming together perfectly, Sarah said, surveying the space with satisfaction. Tomorrow will be unforgettable. On that point, Lucas silently agreed. The Williams & Cross LLP launch party transformed the firm's space into a monument to success not yet earned but confidently anticipated. 200 of the city's legal and business elite circulated beneath crystal chandeliers, their conversations creating a symphony of power and ambition against a backdrop of live classical music. Lucas accepted a flute of champagne from a passing server, his investment manifest in every detail from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the rare orchid arrangements. He nodded to the State Bar Association president, who raised his glass in acknowledgement. You must be proud, said Richard Hartley, a venture capitalist who had backed several of Lucas's earlier projects. Quite a showcase Sarah has created. The firm has tremendous potential, Lucas replied, his gaze finding Sarah across the room. She stood within a circle of judicial figures, her midnight blue dress a statement of authority, her laughter calibrated to convey both confidence and charm. When their eyes briefly met, her smile remained, but didn't reach them. "She's certainly making an impression," Richard observed, "though I haven't heard your name mentioned in any of the speeches." "The firm needs to establish its own identity," Lucas echoed Judith's words from yesterday, though they rang hollow now. A subtle shift in the room's energy drew his attention to the small stage where Judith Cross now stood at the microphone. "If I could have everyone's attention," she announced, "Sarah Williams would like to share a special announcement with all of you." The crowd quieted as Sarah moved toward the stage, her posture perfect, her expression one of practiced poise. Lucas moved closer, champagne in hand, anticipating the culmination of their shared investment. Sarah took the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding courtrooms. The room fell silent, all eyes drawn to her commanding presence on the small stage. "First, I want to thank each of you for being here to celebrate the launch of Williams & Cross." Her voice carried clearly through the space. "This firm represents not just a business venture, but a vision of what modern legal practice can achieve." Her gaze swept the room before finding Lucas near the front. "Some of you know my husband, Lucas Chen." A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd. "Lucas has always believed in being meticulously prepared for every eventuality." Her smile remained fixed as she nodded to someone at the back of the room, "a quality I've come to appreciate." A server approached Lucas, not with champagne, but with a manila envelope on a silver tray. "In the spirit of proper legal procedure," Sarah continued, her voice carrying over the sudden whispers, "I wanted to ensure these documents were served with appropriate witnesses." Lucas looked down at the envelope, its legal purpose immediately clear. "My husband has funded this firm as a business investment," Sarah said, each word precise, "but our personal partnership has run its course." The silence in the room was absolute. Time seemed to slow as Lucas opened the envelope, extracting divorce papers bearing Sarah's signature dated 3 weeks earlier. The careful planning evident in their preparation struck him with clinical clarity. He looked up to find 200 pairs of eyes watching, some embarrassed, others curious, a few calculating the professional advantages of this public dissolution. "I appreciate your understanding during this transition," Sarah concluded smoothly. "Now please enjoy the celebration." As conversation awkwardly resumed, photographers from legal publications captured the moment, exactly as she had intended. The rational part of Lucas's mind, the part that had built his success through calculated decision-making, activated with remarkable clarity despite the shock still reverberating through his system. Years of navigating business crises had trained him to think most clearly when emotions threatened to overwhelm. He carefully returned the papers to their envelope, his movements deliberate. The weight of observation pressed against him from all sides, a collective audience waiting for a reaction that would become tomorrow's gossip. $20 million. Meticulously documented as business investments, not marital assets. This thought steadied him like a hand on his shoulder. The papers Sarah had so dramatically served contained nothing that could undo the legal protections he had insisted upon despite her resistance. "Lucas," Judith Cross approached, her expression a practiced blend of professional concern and distance. "Perhaps we should speak privately." "That won't be necessary," he replied, his voice surprisingly steady. "The documentation speaks for itself." A slight flicker in her eyes suggested this wasn't the response they had anticipated. Several colleagues moved toward him, offering awkward expressions of support, but he detected the underlying calculation in their approach, assessing which relationship offered more professional advantage. As he made his way toward the exit, he caught fragments of whispered conversations, noted the quickly averted gazes. The public humiliation had been perfectly orchestrated, but the anticipated destruction of his composure, the second act of tonight's performance, would not materialize. Richard Hartley intercepted him near the door. "That was strategic," Lucas finished for him, "though perhaps not in the way intended. You seem remarkably composed." Lucas considered this. When you've built something from nothing, you learn to protect it properly. He stepped into the cool evening air, feeling strangely unburdened. The initial shock was giving way to a clear understanding of what would come next. The divorce papers marked not an ending, but a different kind of beginning, one where his investment would need to be carefully reclaimed before it could be redirected toward something more meaningful than tonight's theatrical betrayal. "The investment structure you established was remarkably thorough," Eleanor Barnes said, spreading documents across her desk. Sunlight streamed through her office windows, illuminating the orderly rows of law books that lined the walls, a stark contrast to the ostentatious design of Williams and Cross. Lucas sat opposite her, his posture composed, despite having slept little. Sarah resisted the documentation requirements, which only validates your instinct to insist upon them. Eleanor adjusted her reading glasses, her 30 years of corporate law experience evident in her methodical review. The $20 million is clearly structured as a business investment with specific performance metrics and capital recovery provisions. And legally distinct from marital assets? Completely. She tapped a specific clause. This provision explicitly separates the investment from your personal relationship. The divorce filing doesn't alter your position as primary investor. Lucas felt a curious mixture of relief and hollowness. The business protections were intact, but they highlighted the complete separation between his marriage and the firm, a distinction Sarah had clearly understood before he had. "The disbursement schedule is particularly well crafted," Eleanor continued, indicating a spreadsheet. "Each capital injection is documented with corresponding business development benchmarks. The building lease, staffing expansion, technology infrastructure," Lucas recited, remembering the careful planning. "Exactly. And the firm has only achieved approximately 60% of these benchmarks, despite receiving nearly the full investment amount." Lucas leaned forward. "What's the most efficient path to recovery?" "A systematic withdrawal based on the underperformance provisions in Section 12. Eleanor turned to the relevant page. "You have clear legal standing to reclaim the uninvested portion immediately and begin a structured withdrawal of the remainder." As Eleanor outlined the process, Lucas felt his strategic mind engaging again. The documentation he had insisted upon, the same requirements Sarah had found unnecessarily formal between spouses, now formed an impenetrable shield against her betrayal. "I'll prepare the initial notifications," Eleanor said, gathering the documents into a folder. "When would you like to begin?" "Immediately," Lucas replied, already considering his next steps. "But I want to minimize collateral damage to innocent employees." "The firm currently employs 43 people," Michael Reeves explained, manipulating the financial model on his tablet. "Support staff, paralegals, junior associates, most hired within the last 3 months." They sat in Lucas's office, financial diagrams projected on the wall screen. Afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the strategic planning session. "How many were hired specifically for expansion enabled by my investment?" Lucas asked. "Approximately 32, Michael replied. "The organizational chart shows most are assigned to new practice areas developed with your capital." "And they're innocent parties in this situation," Lucas said, more to himself than to the financial advisors. Michael exchanged glances with his colleague. "We can structure the withdrawal to minimize immediate job losses. A phased approach would allow time for either client revenue to replace your capital or for staff to find alternative positions. That's my preference. Lucas studied the projected cash flow model. What's the optimal timeline? 90 days would be reasonable, offered Janet Liu, Michael's associate. Begin with immediate recovery of uncommitted funds, then implement a tiered withdrawal of the invested capital. The firm would experience significant pressure, Michael added, but wouldn't collapse immediately. They'd have time to seek alternative financing. Lucas nodded. Draft the plan with those parameters. I want the recovery to be systematic, but not vindictive. There's something else to consider, Janet said carefully. Immediate notification will trigger protective actions from their side. They'll try to secure or redirect assets before you can reclaim them. That's to be expected, Lucas acknowledged, but the documentation gives us priority position. In theory, Michael cautioned, in practice, they could attempt to complicate access. Then we'll need to begin with a comprehensive audit of how the funds have been utilized thus far, Lucas decided. Before implementing the withdrawal, we should know exactly where every dollar currently stands. We can initiate that today, Janet said, making notes on her tablet. Our forensic accounting team can begin immediate review. Perfect, Lucas replied, his strategic mind fully engaged. Let's proceed with both the audit and the withdrawal plan development. I want full recovery without unnecessary destruction. As they finalized the approach, Lucas felt a sense of professional purpose replacing the personal betrayal. This was now a business recovery operation, a domain where his expertise was unquestioned. Mr. Chen, we've identified several concerning irregularities. David Winters, the forensic accountant, looked uncomfortable as he placed a folder on Lucas's desk. The office lights seemed harsher now, shadows deepening as evening approached. What kind of irregularities? Lucas asked, opening the folder to review the highlighted financial transactions. 3 significant issues. David pointed to the first section. Approximately $4 million has been reclassified in their internal accounting as founding partner capital contribution rather than external investment. Lucas felt a cold clarity descending. When did this reclassification occur? 2 weeks before the launch party. David turned to the next page. Additionally, another $3 million was transferred to offshore accounts designated as international practice development, but we can find no evidence of actual international operations. And the third issue? Several transactions totaling nearly $2 million were executed just this morning, transferring funds from the firm's primary operating accounts to personal accounts held by Ms. Williams and Ms. Pitts-Cross. The revelation landed like a physical blow, yet Lucas's expression remained unchanged. This wasn't merely personal betrayal. It was systematic financial misconduct. These movements appear deliberately designed to obscure the investment trail, David continued. There's a clear pattern of reclassifying your investment as internal capital, which would significantly complicate recovery efforts. Do we have documentation of the original transfers? Lucas asked. Yes. We've compiled a complete audit trail showing the original investment flows from your accounts to the firm. David produced another document. The paper trail is unambiguous despite their attempts to obscure it. Lucas studied the evidence, his mind calculating implications rather than dwelling on the betrayal. Sarah hadn't just ended their marriage. She'd attempted to appropriate his investment through deliberate misrepresentation. The public humiliation had been merely the visible portion of a much deeper deception. How quickly can we secure court intervention to freeze the remaining assets? He asked. Given the clear documentation and evidence of potentially fraudulent reclassification, we could file for emergency injunctive relief tomorrow morning. Lucas closed the folder, his decision crystallizing. Prepare everything necessary. We'll file at the earliest possible moment. As David gathered his materials, Lucas turned to the window, watching city lights emerge against the darkening sky. The discovery transformed what had been a measured business recovery into something more urgent and potentially more destructive. Sarah's actions had eliminated the possibility of a measured withdrawal that would protect innocent employees. What had begun as personal betrayal had escalated to professional misconduct that demanded immediate and decisive action, regardless of collateral consequences. They filed a motion to reclassify the entire investment as a marital gift, Eleanor Barnes announced, sliding the legal document across the conference table. Morning light illuminated the paper's official seal, casting sharp shadows across its threatening language. Lucas picked up the motion, scanning its contents with practiced efficiency. On what grounds? They're claiming the investment was made with donative intent, that despite the documentation, your true purpose was supporting your spouse's career as an extension of the marital relationship. Eleanor's tone remained professional despite the obvious absurdity of the claim. We have signed agreements explicitly stating otherwise, Lucas noted, which they're characterizing as precautionary measures not intended for actual enforcement. Eleanor removed her glasses. They've also submitted affidavits from 3 witnesses claiming you verbally described the investment as a gift during private conversations. Fabrications, Lucas said quietly. James Chen, Lucas's litigation specialist, leaned forward. They're judge shopping too. The case has been assigned to Judge Williamson, who has previous professional connections to Judith Cross. Can we request reassignment? Lucas asked. Filed this morning, James confirmed. But there's more. They've submitted an emergency motion to prevent you from accessing any firm accounts during litigation, claiming irreparable harm would result. A freezing order, Eleanor clarified, which would effectively lock your investment in place while they continue operating with your capital. Lucas felt a tightening in his chest, not panic, but a concentrated anger at the calculated nature of these maneuvers. The legal counterattack had clearly been planned well before the public divorce announcement. They're also claiming your withdrawal attempts constitute economic sabotage motivated by personal vindictiveness, James added, pointing to another paragraph in the filing. So they publicly humiliate me, attempt to misappropriate my investment, and then claim I'm being vindictive by trying to recover it, Lucas summarized, his voice controlled despite the bitter irony. Exactly. Eleanor nodded grimly. These tactics are designed to exhaust you emotionally and financially. They're hoping you'll settle for a fraction of the investment rather than endure protracted litigation. Lucas placed the document down deliberately. They've miscalculated. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about professional integrity. As the legal team outlined their counter-strategy, Lucas recognized that this battle had evolved beyond a personal betrayal or investment recovery. It had become a test of whether documented business agreements could be invalidated by personal relationships, a precedent that would affect far more than just his own situation. You should see this, Richard Hartley said, passing his tablet across Lucas's desk. The headline of the Business Journal article read, "Tech Entrepreneur Targets Ex-Wife's Firm in Vindictive Financial Assault." 3 days had passed since the initial legal filings, and the conflict had spilled into public view with calculated precision. There's more, Richard continued, scrolling through similar stories. Venture Capital Community Questions, Chen's Business Ethics. Williams and Cross, Fighting Hostile Takeover by Founder's Ex-Husband. Tech Investors' Revenge Threatens Legal Services for Corporate Clients. Lucas scanned the articles, noting the strategic positioning of each narrative. All from the same media relations firm. The one on Williams and Cross's retainer, Richard confirmed. They're building a public relations case to support their legal position. Melanie entered with a printout. The tech blogs have picked it up now. They're circulating rumors that your recent acquisition of Synth Logic was similarly undermined by personal vendettas. Lucas felt the pressure mounting from multiple directions. His phone buzzed with a message from a longtime business associate. Need to talk about these allegations, causing concerns with our board. They're attacking on every front, Richard observed. Professional reputation, business relationships, investor confidence. And it's spreading. Melanie handed him another message. 3 potential partners for the Singapore expansion have requested postponement of negotiations pending resolution of current issues. Lucas stood and walked to the window, feeling the walls closing in. 15 years of meticulously built reputation was being systematically undermined through carefully crafted narratives. We should consider a counteroffensive, Richard suggested. I know several journalists who would publish your side, which would validate their narrative of a personal vendetta, Lucas interrupted. They want to drag this into a public spectacle. But your silence is being interpreted as guilt, Melanie pointed out. Lucas turned from the window, a dangerous edge entering his thoughts. He had the resources to launch a devastating counterattack, financial, legal, and informational. He could systematically dismantle Sarah's professional reputation just as she was attempting to destroy his. The temptation toward retribution pulsed through him with unexpected intensity. One call to certain contacts could initiate an investigative exposé into Williams and Cross's client practices. Another could trigger regulatory scrutiny of their financial structure. "What are you thinking?" Richard asked, recognizing the shift in Lucas's expression. "That there are asymmetric responses available," Lucas replied quietly, the tactical part of his mind already mapping destruction scenarios with cold efficiency. The power to retaliate sat heavy in his hands, a capacity for devastation that both tempted and troubled him. Victory through such means would recover his investment, but cost something less tangible yet more valuable. The penthouse was silent, except for the subtle hum of the city below, visible through floor-to-ceiling windows as a constellation of lights against the midnight darkness. Lucas stood before the glass wall, tie loosened, jacket discarded hours ago. On the table behind him lay the strategic response his team had prepared. Aggressive but legally sound. A pathway to both financial recovery and professional vindication. Yet he had hesitated to authorize its implementation. "What constitutes success here?" he asked aloud to the empty room. The question hung in the air, unexpectedly profound in its simplicity. Throughout his career, success had been quantifiable. Valuations, acquisitions, returns on investment. Clear metrics for achievement. But this situation defied such straightforward evaluation. Complete victory in the legal battle would recover his investment, but would also likely destroy the firm, including the careers of dozens of innocent employees. A public war of reputation would damage both sides regardless of outcome. He turned from the window, moving to his desk, where a small collection of personal items stood in contrast to the minimalist design of the space. A photograph from his early days, sleeping on a friend's couch while coding his first product. A simple award from a mentoring program for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. These fragments of his journey reflected something beyond financial achievement, purpose, impact, contribution. Metrics that couldn't be captured in quarterly reports or valuation models. What would constitute true success? He asked again, the question deepening. Recovering $20 million would replenish his accounts, but wouldn't restore what had been truly lost. Destroying Sarah's firm would satisfy a primal urge for justice, but wouldn't heal the breach of trust. He recalled a conversation with an early mentor. The ultimate measure of success isn't what you accumulate, but what you contribute. The thought settled into his consciousness with unexpected weight. Perhaps this crisis, painful and unjust as it was, offered an opportunity to redefine success itself. Not as victory over an adversary, but as transformation of adversity into something of genuine value. Lucas moved back to the window, the city lights now seeming less like individual points and more like an interconnected community. His financial resources could be deployed not just as weapons in a legal battle, but as instruments of positive impact. The question shifted in his mind, not how to win this conflict, but how to transform it into something worthwhile. Not how to respond to betrayal, but how to redirect its energy toward genuine contribution. As the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky, Lucas felt an unexpected clarity emerging from his darkest moment, a realization that perhaps the true foundation being tested wasn't his financial standing, but his understanding of what gave life its ultimate meaning. "The judge has granted our emergency injunction," Eleanor announced, placing the court order on Lucas's desk. "Williams and Cross assets are frozen pending full financial review, and their motion to reclassify the investment has been denied." Sunlight streamed through the office windows, illuminating the legal victory in stark black and white. 3 weeks of intense litigation had culminated in this moment, a clear vindication of Lucas's position. Judge Franklin was particularly troubled by the evidence of fund misappropriation, James added. He's ordered a complete forensic accounting under court supervision. Lucas nodded, studying the document without the satisfaction he had expected to feel. And their PR campaign? "Losing momentum as the financial improprieties become public," Eleanor replied. "Several major clients have already withdrawn their business." The strategic part of his mind registered these developments as positive outcomes, yet they generated no corresponding emotional response. The victory felt hollow, a technical achievement without deeper meaning. "What's our next step?" James asked. Lucas looked up from the document. "Continue as planned. Recover the investment according to the court order." "We've essentially won," Eleanor observed. "Their firm will likely not survive this intact." "I know," Lucas said simply. The legal team exchanged glances, clearly expecting more satisfaction from their client. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, they gathered their materials and departed with promises to keep him updated. Alone in his office, Lucas turned to the window. Outside, the city continued its midday rhythm, indifferent to his personal victory. He had protected his investment, preserved his business reputation, and effectively countered Sarah's betrayal. All outcomes he had sought. Yet the achievement felt strangely empty, like winning a game whose rules suddenly seemed arbitrary. He stood abruptly, grabbing his jacket. "Melanie," he called to his assistant as he passed her desk. "I'm taking the afternoon. Reschedule anything that can't wait." "Of course," she replied, surprised by the uncharacteristic spontaneity. "Where should I say you've gone, if anyone asks?" "Out," he said simply, stepping into the elevator. He needed space beyond these walls where success felt so unsatisfying, air that wasn't heavy with hollow achievement. Lucas found himself in a small cafe several blocks from his office, the kind of neighborhood place he normally bypassed for more upscale establishments. Its weathered wooden tables and mismatched chairs offered an anonymity that appealed to him now. "Mind if I share your table? Everything else is full." He looked up to see a woman in her 30s, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, coffee balanced precariously in her hand. "Please," he gestured to the empty chair, welcoming the distraction. "Thanks." She set down her things, extending her hand. Maya Torres. Lucas Chen. Recognition flickered briefly in her eyes, but was quickly replaced by polite neutrality. "Busy day?" she asked, nodding toward his untouched coffee. "More unproductive than busy," he admitted. "You?" "Just the opposite. Too productive with too few resources." She opened her laptop, revealing a sticker for Phoenix Legal Collective, justice accessible to all. "You're an attorney?" "Community legal advocate," she clarified, "working with underserved neighborhoods in Brooklyn where not all high-rises and corporate litigation." Something in her direct manner intrigued him. "What kind of issues do you handle?" "Housing discrimination, predatory lending, immigration status complications, domestic violence protection." Maya took a sip of her coffee. "The kind of legal problems that don't come with retainers, but have real-life consequences." "And Phoenix Legal Collective provides these services?" "We try. We're perpetually understaffed and underfunded. Today, I'm working on grant applications instead of client cases because we can't keep the lights on otherwise." Lucas found himself unexpectedly engaged. "How many attorneys work there?" 3 full-time, 4 part-time volunteers. "We serve about 800 clients annually and turn away twice that many." She looked at him more carefully. "You're the tech entrepreneur, aren't you? The one in that legal battle with Williams and Cross." "News travels fast," he observed. "Legal community gossip," she shrugged. "For what it's worth, not everyone buys their narrative." "I appreciate that," he said, finding he genuinely meant it. "Sorry if I'm being too direct," Maya continued, "but from what I understand, you've got $20 million in dispute with a firm that charges more for an hour of consultation than our entire daily operating budget." "That's accurate." "Meanwhile, we're turning away domestic violence victims because we don't have enough staff to handle their restraining orders." She closed her laptop. "Perspective is a hell of a thing, isn't it?" Instead of taking offense, Lucas felt something shift in his thinking. "Would you tell me more about Phoenix? What would meaningful support actually look like for an organization like yours?" Maya studied him for a moment, seeming to weigh his sincerity. "I could tell you, but it might be more effective to show you. If you're genuinely interested, come by our office tomorrow. See what community legal work actually looks like." "I'd like that," Lucas replied, surprised by his own certainty. She wrote an address on a napkin and slid it across the table. 2 o'clock. No suits, no entourage. Just come see what justice looks like at ground level. The Phoenix Legal Collective occupied the first floor of a converted brownstone in Brooklyn, its modest storefront marked by a simple sign featuring a rising phoenix. Inside, the reception area buzzed with activity. Clients waiting on worn but clean furniture, staff moving purposefully between small offices. "Most of our clients work hourly jobs," Maya explained as she led Lucas through the space. "Taking time off means lost wages they can't afford, so we stay open evenings and weekends." Unlike the marble and glass of Williams and Cross, Phoenix's environment was utilitarian but warm. Children's drawings decorated one wall, and a community bulletin board overflowed with local resources and announcements. "Carlos, do you have a minute?" Maya called to a middle-aged attorney whose desk was buried under case files. "This is Lucas Chen." He's interested in understanding our work. Carlos looked up, offering a hand worn by years of practical work rather than manicured for client meetings. Perfect timing. I'm just finishing Mrs. Ramirez's housing discrimination case. What was the issue? Lucas asked. Landlord tried to evict her after she reported code violations. No heat, faulty wiring, mold. Carlos held up a document. We just secured a settlement that repairs the violations, compensates her, and protects other tenants from retaliation. How much did she pay for your services? Lucas inquired. Nothing. We're entirely grant and donation funded. Carlos gestured to the waiting room. Every person out there has a legitimate legal need and no means to pay market rates. As they continued the tour, Lucas observed a domestic violence survivor receiving help with protection orders, immigrants navigating complex documentation requirements, and elderly residents facing predatory financial schemes. Our biggest limitation is capacity, Maya explained, showing him a cramped conference room doubling as a legal library. We have to turn away 3 clients for everyone we help. What would it take to double your capacity? Lucas asked. Realistically, about $1 million annually would transform our operation. Expanded staff, better technology, more space. She smiled wryly. Basically a rounding error in corporate law, but completely out of reach for us. They paused by a wall featuring client success stories, families keeping their homes, individuals securing protection from abuse, communities defending against exploitative development. This is real impact, Lucas observed quietly, something resonating deeply within him. It's why we do this despite the challenges, Maya agreed. Corporate law changes stock prices. This changes lives. As they completed the tour, Lucas found himself mentally calculating what $10 million, half his disputed investment, could accomplish in this environment, not as charity, but as strategic investment in justice. Thank you for showing me this, he said, as they returned to the reception area. It's given me a lot to think about. Just thinking won't help our clients, Maya replied candidly. But I appreciate you taking the time to see what we do. Lucas nodded, his strategic mind already formulating a new vision, one where the resources he'd fought to reclaim could be redirected toward impact that no quarterly report could quantify, yet whose value was unmistakably real. As he stepped back onto the Brooklyn street, the Phoenix sign caught the afternoon sun, its symbolism suddenly personal. The possibility of something meaningful rising from the ashes of betrayal. Our objective is complete recovery of the investment while minimizing collateral damage, Lucas stated, standing before the digital display in his conference room. 2 days after his Brooklyn visit, he'd gathered his core team to finalize the withdrawal strategy. Eleanor studied the timeline projected on the wall. The court order gives us considerable latitude. We could execute a complete withdrawal immediately. But that would effectively collapse the firm overnight, Michael Reeves noted, manipulating financial projections on his tablet. 30-plus employees would lose their positions with no transition period. Exactly, Lucas replied. I want a more measured approach. He tapped the screen, bringing up a 3-phase plan. Stage 1. Immediate recovery of the uncommitted funds, approximately $6 million. Stage 2. Structured withdrawal of operating capital over 60 days. Stage 3. Conversion of remaining infrastructure investments to negotiable assets. James Chen raised an eyebrow. This extends the process considerably. The court would support immediate execution. Legal entitlement and ethical execution are different considerations, Lucas responded. The phased approach accomplishes our financial objectives while allowing time for client transitions and employee adjustments. What about the offshore accounts? Eleanor asked. Those funds, nearly $3 million, will be recovered immediately through the court-appointed receiver, Lucas confirmed. But the operating accounts will be drawn down systematically rather than drained at once. Michael nodded, updating the financial models. This approach reduces the likelihood of bankruptcy filing, which could complicate and delay full recovery. Precisely, Lucas agreed. And it creates space for employees to secure alternative positions. Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. May I ask what's changed? 2 weeks ago, you were prepared for more decisive action. Lucas considered the question, remembering the cramped but purposeful offices of the Phoenix Legal Collective. I've gained perspective on the difference between winning a battle and creating meaningful impact. The timeline looks feasible, Michael confirmed, displaying the updated projection. We'll need court approval for the modified structure, but given the judge's previous rulings, that shouldn't be problematic. Then let's proceed, Lucas decided. File the modified recovery plan tomorrow. Begin implementation of Phase 1 immediately upon approval, and prepare for the systematic withdrawal of operating funds. As the team reviewed implementation details, Lucas felt a clarity of purpose that had been missing in his earlier victory. The strategy balanced legitimate recovery with measured restraint, justice without unnecessary destruction. Phase 1 implementation complete, Michael reported, displaying the transaction records on Lucas's office monitor. 1 week had passed since the court approved their modified plan, and the first stage of reclamation had proceeded precisely as designed. $6.4 million recovered from uncommitted funds and offshore accounts, he continued. The court-appointed forensic accountant has verified full compliance with the withdrawal order. Lucas reviewed the figures, noting the precision of their execution. What's been the initial impact on firm operations? Significant, but not catastrophic, Janet explained, bringing up operational metrics. They've postponed their office expansion, reduced administrative staff by approximately 20%, and several junior associates have already secured positions elsewhere. Client retention, down 30%, Michael replied. Major corporate clients are transitioning their business to other firms, particularly those who became aware of the financial improprieties. Lucas nodded, absorbing the information with professional detachment. The consequences were substantial but proportionate, the natural result of Sarah and Judith's actions rather than vindictive destruction. The financial press has taken notice, Janet added, displaying several business publication headlines. Williams and Cross downsizing amid investment dispute, corporate law startup faces funding withdrawal, legal industry watching Williams and Cross restructuring. Notably balanced coverage, Lucas observed, a far cry from the character assassination attempts. The facts have shifted the narrative, Michael agreed. Their public relations campaign collapsed once the financial improprieties became public record. The intercom buzzed, and Melanie's voice came through. Mr. Chen, I have Maya Torres from Phoenix Legal Collective on line 2. I'll take it, Lucas replied, gesturing for his team to continue their analysis. Mr. Chen, I'm following up on our conversation, Maya said when he answered. I'm curious if you've given any further thought to our work. I have, he confirmed. In fact, I'm currently in the process of reclaiming resources that might be redirected more meaningfully. That sounds intriguingly vague, she responded with a hint of amusement. I prefer strategically ambiguous, he countered, but I expect to have more concrete discussions soon. Would next week work for a meeting with your executive director? I'll make it work, Maya assured him. This community needs advocates who have both purpose and resources. As he ended the call, Lucas turned back to the financial data with renewed focus. Each dollar recovered represented not just the restoration of his investment, but potential resource for impact beyond anything Sarah had envisioned when establishing her firm. The systematic dismantling of Williams and Cross wasn't an end in itself, but a necessary transition toward something more meaningful, a strategic reallocation rather than mere recovery. "They've filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection," Eleanor announced, entering Lucas's office with court documents in hand. 6 weeks into the withdrawal process, the final phase was encountering significant resistance. "Strategic timing," Lucas observed, scanning the filing. "Just as we're approaching the infrastructure investments." "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "The bankruptcy filing automatically stays our recovery actions, pending court review." They're attempting to shield the remaining assets, approximately $7 million in technology systems, lease rights, and client relationship infrastructure. "How does this affect our timeline?" Lucas asked. "It introduces delays," she admitted. "Bankruptcy court will need to evaluate creditor claims against remaining assets. They'll argue that immediate liquidation would destroy going concern value." James entered with additional documentation. Their legal team has filed supporting declarations claiming the firm remains viable if allowed to restructure its obligations, including your investment recovery. Lucas considered this development with analytical calm. "Options? We can contest the bankruptcy filing as bad faith delay tactic," Eleanor suggested. "Our existing court orders give us priority position among creditors. Alternatively," James added, "we could negotiate a settlement that provides immediate partial recovery of the remaining assets while allowing the firm to continue operations at reduced scale." Lucas leaned back in his chair, weighing both approaches. The bankruptcy filing was clearly Sarah's attempt to preserve some fraction of the firm she'd built, a desperate last stand to salvage something from the systematic withdrawal of his investment. "What percentage of recovery would a negotiated settlement likely yield?" he asked. "Given our priority position, we could reasonably secure 60 to 70% of the remaining assets immediately," Eleanor estimated. "Approximately $4 to $5 million. Versus full recovery after prolonged bankruptcy proceedings? Potentially the full $7 million, but with litigation costs and delays of 6 to 18 months, James clarified. Lucas made his decision. "Proposed settlement terms: immediate transfer of $5 million in liquid assets and technology infrastructure, with the remaining $2 million converted to a long-term subordinated loan to the restructured firm." Eleanor looked surprised. "That's unusually generous terms." "It accomplishes our core objective while allowing the firm to survive," Lucas explained. "The loan can be structured with reasonable repayment terms tied to performance metrics." "They'll likely accept those terms immediately," James noted. "It gives them a chance to rebuild, albeit at significantly reduced scale." "Draft the proposal," Lucas instructed. "I want it filed by tomorrow morning." As his legal team departed to prepare the documents, Lucas turned to the window. The settlement would complete his investment recovery, nearly $18 million returned through methodical, measured action. The firm would survive as a much smaller operation, humbled but not destroyed. Justice had been achieved without vindictive destruction. The resources he'd protected were now available for redirection toward something far more meaningful than either personal vengeance or corporate law profits. For the first time since Sarah's betrayal, Lucas felt genuine satisfaction, not from defeating his former spouse, but from transforming what could have been merely a bitter legal battle into the foundation for something truly worthwhile. $10 million, Lucas stated, placing the proposal document on the conference table in Phoenix Legal Collective's modest meeting room. Structured as an endowment, with $5 million immediately available for expansion and $5 million invested to provide sustainable operating funds. The three Phoenix leaders exchanged astonished glances. Director Elena Rodriguez, a veteran community advocate with 20 years of experience, spoke first. "That's substantially more than we discussed. Our entire annual budget is currently under $1 million. Which limits your impact unnecessarily," Lucas replied. "The proposal includes a 3-year growth plan to establish satellite offices in 3 additional underserved neighborhoods, expand your staff to 25 full-time attorneys, and implement technology infrastructure to maximize efficiency." Maya Torres, who had first introduced Lucas to Phoenix, studied the detailed financial projections. "This would transform our capacity completely. We could serve thousands more clients annually." "Without changing your mission," Lucas emphasized. "I'm not looking to redirect your focus, but to amplify your impact." Carlos Menendez, Phoenix's senior attorney, reviewed the governance structure outlined in the document. "This establishes an independent foundation but maintains our operational autonomy. Essential for sustainable impact," Lucas confirmed. "My business experience can help with infrastructure and scaling, but your team understands the community needs and legal priorities." Elena looked up from the proposal. "Why are you doing this? $10 million is extraordinary." Lucas considered the question thoughtfully. "I recently recovered this investment from a situation where it was creating minimal, meaningful impact. This redirection aligns resources with genuine community need." "The Phoenix Foundation," Maya read from the document title. "Rising from the ashes of corporate law to serve community justice." "Something like that," Lucas acknowledged with a slight smile. Elena extended her hand across the table. "We accept your proposal with deep gratitude and commitment to honoring this investment through impact." As they shook hands, Lucas felt something shift within him, a sense of purposeful engagement, unlike anything he'd experienced in years of business success. The same strategic thinking that had built his tech fortune and protected his investment was now directed towards something with meaning beyond financial metrics. The meeting transitioned to implementation planning, the worn table soon covered with building plans, staffing models, and technology specifications. The Phoenix leaders' expertise in community needs complemented Lucas's business acumen, creating a collaborative vision far more powerful than either could have developed alone. By meeting's end, the path forward was clear, not merely funding, but a true partnership bridging worlds that rarely connected, focused on justice that corporate law rarely prioritized. "Before your investment, we had to turn away 8 domestic violence survivors in a typical week," Maya explained as she led Lucas through Phoenix's expanded offices 3 months later. "Now, we haven't turned away a single one in 6 weeks." The transformation was remarkable. The original brownstone had been renovated and expanded, with modern technology seamlessly integrated into the community-focused environment. Professional staff had doubled, with satellite offices already operational in 2 additional neighborhoods. "Mrs. Rivera, would you mind sharing your experience?" Maya asked a woman waiting in the newly designed client area. "When my landlord shut off heat and threatened eviction after I complained about the mold making my children sick, Phoenix took my case immediately." Mrs. Rivera explained in Spanish, with Maya translating. "Now my family has safe housing, the building is being repaired, and the landlord faces penalties." Throughout the afternoon, Lucas witnessed similar stories. Immigrants navigating complex documentation systems, elderly residents protected from financial predators, workers recovering stolen wages. Each represented not just a legal victory, but a life stabilized. Our new technology infrastructure has reduced paperwork time by 60%, Carlos demonstrated at a workstation. Attorneys now spend more time with clients and less on administration. In the community education room, a workshop for tenants' rights was underway, led by a newly hired attorney who had grown up in the neighborhood. "We're not just handling crises," Maya explained. "We're preventing them through education and community empowerment." As they walked through the Brooklyn streets to visit one of the new satellite offices, Lucas noticed the Phoenix logo prominently displayed. The mythical bird rising from flames, now a symbol of hope in communities where legal protection had been nearly inaccessible. The most significant change isn't just in numbers, Maya reflected as they walked. It's in how people see the law now, not as a weapon used against them, but as a shield they can access. At the satellite office, a mural painted by local artists depicted the community's cultural heritage alongside symbols of justice and protection. Inside, attorneys worked alongside community advocates, the boundaries between professional and client more permeable than in traditional legal settings. "We've established partnerships with 10 community organizations," explained the satellite director. "Legal services now integrate with healthcare, education, and economic development initiatives." Watching the purposeful activity around him, Lucas felt something he hadn't experienced in his entire business career: a direct connection between his resources and tangible human impact. The satisfaction ran deeper than any acquisition or profit margin had ever provided. "This is just the beginning," Maya said, noticing his expression. "Wait until you see what happens when people start believing justice is actually within their reach." "Lucas Chen, I thought that might be you." The voice came from behind Lucas as he reviewed construction plans for Phoenix's third satellite office, now 6 months into the foundation's work. He turned to find Andrea Morales, a former senior associate from Williams & Cross. "Andrea, this is unexpected." "I've been volunteering here on weekends," she explained. "After the firm's restructuring, I wanted something more meaningful than corporate mergers." "How is the restructured firm doing?" Lucas asked, genuinely curious rather than vindictive. "Smaller, more focused. Sarah and Judith are rebuilding with a different approach." Andrea studied him carefully. "No one expected you to invest your reclaimed funds like this." "Including me initially," Lucas admitted. "Life takes unexpected turns." "That's actually why I sought you out today," Andrea continued. "I'm teaching a business law course at City College, and our department is developing a new module on ethical investment structures. Your experience, both the protection mechanisms and this redirection, would be invaluable for students to understand." Lucas considered the request. "You want me to share my experience?" "A guest lecture series," Andrea confirmed. "Many of our students come from backgrounds similar to the communities Phoenix serves. They're pursuing legal education not just for career advancement, but to create change." "That's an interesting proposition." Lucas found himself intrigued by the possibility of translating his experience into wisdom others could apply. "The first module begins next month," Andrea explained, handing him a course outline. "We'd focus on both the technical aspects of investment protection and the philosophical questions about purpose and impact." Reviewing the outline, Lucas recognized the potential value in sharing lessons learned through his journey, not just the mechanics of legal documentation, but the deeper reflections on what constituted meaningful success. "I accept," he said, returning the outline. on one condition, which is, we include field experience with Phoenix Legal Collective as part of the curriculum. Theory needs application to create real understanding. Andrea smiled. Already incorporated in week 8, great minds think alike. As they discussed the course structure, Lucas felt the final piece of his transformation clicking into place. The resources he'd reclaimed were now creating community impact through Phoenix, while his personal experience, both painful and enlightening, would serve as wisdom for the next generation of legal professionals. 2 weeks later, Lucas stood before a diverse classroom of law students, their faces reflecting the communities Phoenix served. His carefully prepared presentation materials remained unused as he opted instead for a more direct approach. "My name is Lucas Chen," he began. "6 months ago, I reclaimed a $20 million investment from a law firm launched with betrayal. Today, I'm going to share how proper documentation protected that investment, and more importantly, how its redirection created impact beyond anything I could have imagined when signing those original agreements." The students leaned forward, engaged by both the personal story and its professional implications. As Lucas continued, he realized he was no longer defining himself by the betrayal he had experienced, but by the purpose he had discovered in its aftermath. The Phoenix had truly risen from the ashes. 1 year after establishing the Phoenix Foundation, Lucas stood on the rooftop of the expanded Brooklyn headquarters, watching sunset light transform the city skyline. Below, a celebration marked the anniversary. Staff, clients, and community members gathered to commemorate what had been accomplished. The metrics were impressive. 4 fully operational offices serving over 3,000 clients annually, 37 full-time attorneys, and measurable improvements in housing stability, family safety, and economic security across the communities served. But numbers couldn't capture the transformation Lucas himself had experienced. What had begun as a $20 million investment, meticulously protected through documentation, had become something far more valuable, a redirection of resources toward genuine impact. The betrayal that once defined his thoughts had receded, replaced by purpose that transcended personal vindication. 3 lessons crystallized in his reflection. First, preparation creates freedom. The same documentation that Sarah had considered unnecessarily formal had ultimately protected not just his financial investment, but his ability to choose its purpose. Prudence wasn't about distrust, but about creating options for an uncertain future. Second, purpose transcends possession. The satisfaction of recovering his investment paled compared to witnessing its impact when redirected toward genuine need. True wealth wasn't measured in accounts, but in meaningful contribution. Third, betrayal could become catalyst. The very experience intended to diminish him had instead expanded his understanding of success beyond traditional metrics into the realm of lasting significance. From the celebration below, voices carried upward. Attorneys and clients, staff and community members, all connected in purpose beyond themselves. This, Lucas realized, was the true measure of success, not what one accumulated, but what one helped create. The Phoenix had truly risen from ashes, transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into benefit, and investment into impact that would outlast any personal conflict.